These are our polynomials that we are going to factor and solve and graph. When there are 4 of them, 4 terms, you might remember that we factor by grouping. So you look more closely here at this first group, and you factor out an x cubed. And that would leave x plus 7. And come over to the second group, factor out a negative 9x. Hopefully it leaves the same thing. Remember in the parenthesis, it does. And then we combine these together. So the 2 outside parts become one of the parentheses. And then the other parenthesis is that one they had in common. Now, typically we're done at this point, but we're going to be dealing with x to the 4ths and 5ths and 6ths, as well as x to the 3rd. So sometimes there's going to be more factoring to be done here, which is the case here. Take out an x in that first parenthesis, which would leave x squared minus 9. And then we have this, x plus 7. Excuse me. And then we're going to find our answers. Now, remember way up here, x to the 4th. That means we should get 4 answers. This one's a 0. This one's a negative 7. You can further factor this if you want to into the x plus 3, x minus 3, but I don't need to see that at this point if you can jump straight to the answers. Those would be your 4 answers. And then I'll expect some kind of like a rough sketch of the graph when you're done. And again, x to the 4th, remember, if it's a positive, looks like a W. And if it was a negative, it would be upside down like an M. Okay, if it were negative. This one's the positive. So these 4 answers. All right, so put 0. And then positive 3, negative 3. Oh, negative 7. That's going to go off the graph just a little bit. And then our W shape. Okay, these don't have to be fabulously drawn at this point. Okay, good enough. Let's look at another one. All right, next one. This is an x to the 5th graph. You might remember that graph looks something like that if it's positive, and flip it upside down if it were negative. These, you can factor out an x squared. That would leave x cubed minus 64. All right, the x squared, you're pretty much done. You would get an answer of 0, and remember that's where you get the answer twice because of the squared, and that would be like a bounce on the graph. All right, now this is your cube. We just did factoring sum and difference of cubes less than a month ago. This is where you make the small parenthesis and the big parenthesis. The first thing you do is cube root both of those. Then we're going to square those and put them to the ends. So x squared and 16. Now remember here, this sign was the same. The next one's going to be the opposite of that one. And the end is always positive. Now, that middle term comes from multiplying those 2 together. Okay, I paused for just a second to write something down that I'm going to show you. When you factor a sum or difference of cubes, like this, okay, I need you to understand that although that's 3 answers, only one of the answers comes out to be a real number. Okay, so like 4 would be that answer. This part right here is always going to just turn out to be 2 imaginaries. Okay, so when you get a problem like this in the homework, I want you to factor it out so that we can go back to practicing factoring of cubes. But again, you only get 1 real answer. The other 2 are imaginary, so just put 2 i's below here. Okay, here's the proof in case you wanted to see. We can't further factor that, which means our only option would be to go to quadratic formula. So here's your negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4 times a times c, okay, divided by 2a. Anyways, all of that, what's going to happen inside the square root is this gives you 16 minus 4 times 1 times 16 is 64. And if you subtract that, that gives you a negative inside that square root, which just turns out to be imaginaries. Okay, so just keep in mind, you're only going to get 1 real answer, 2 imaginaries, and then remember this whole polynomial from the beginning was an x to the 5th. We also had these zeros twice. So this graph is a little weird. All right, so we got an answer at 0, an answer at 4, and that's pretty much it. Okay, but it's an x to the 5th. It has to look like this. So first off, we're going to start the graph and then bounce off of the 0. So as soon as it gets up to it, it bounces right back off. Okay, then we go through the 4. That's our only other real answer. And then we just have this little bump up at the top. That way this does look like that graph, but these two spots would be like where the imaginaries live. Okay, so it has that look. It does have 5 answers, but 2